So I think we have reached peak authenticity. I've been plotting how often the word authenticity appears in the business press, either in headlines or lead paragraphs, and this is what it looks like. An upwards line. It's tripled over the last 10 years. If you go on Amazon.com, you can buy about 20,000 books on how to be more authentic. If you Google it, you'll get about 4 million workshops you can choose from on how to be yourself. So, from my point of view, clearly we have a problem if we have to spend so much money just to be ourselves. But the cost, as I see it, is not just to our pocketbooks. I've come to conclude that the way we think about authenticity poses a real danger to our capacity to grow and learn. Let me explain. So I teach and I research people who come to those points that I call what got you here won't get you there moments. What got you here won't get you there. Those are those moments when whatever's made you successful in the past, what got you here, is not going to make you successful going forward there and may well just get in the way. So for example, say that you're fantastic at delivering results through your own efforts, but now you have to deliver results through other people. Or say you're an amazing analyst and you get promoted, and now your technical brilliance is getting in the way of your ability to communicate very simply with people who don't have the same technical training as you. And what's tricky about these transition points is not that those new skills are hard to learn. It's that the old ones have become core to our sense of who we are, our identity. And so not sticking with them feels like we're somehow being inauthentic. And so we do, and we get stuck. Let me give you an example. Anna, one of the people who I talked to in the course of my research, was the CEO of a mid-sized transportation company. She had been brought in from the outside to turn the company around, and she had. The results were great. They were profitable again. She had raised revenues. They had overhauled operations. But she was always finding herself at cross purposes with the chairman of the company, and this was playing itself out badly at their board meetings. They were not aligned. And essentially what was going on is that he wanted her to give a much more inspirational, personal message. That was his style. And she was your prototypic engineer, by the numbers kind of person. And so there was a clash. And as I listened to her talk about her frustration, I said to her, look, Anna, it sounds to me like what he's saying is that maybe the next time that you have a key meeting, instead of leading with the spreadsheets as you tend to do, perhaps you might think about telling a bit of a personal story, an anecdote about something important that taught you something about the way you think, what you're bringing to the party now. And she just looked at me cold and said, we're in danger today. I can still hear her voice. We're in danger today of being mesmerized by people who play with our reptilian brains. For me, it's manipulation. Of course I can tell a story, but if the string is too obvious, I can't make myself do it. Now, here's the question. Is Anna being authentic? Yeah. Is Anna being rigid? Yeah. And so how do you tell the difference? So let's look at some of the ways in which we define authenticity and see if they can help us sort it out. The most simple way, the most common way we define authenticity is being true to yourself. But that begs the question, which self? Your old self, the past, today's self, the future? And does being authentic condemn you to being as you always have been? Of course not. Now, oftentimes, we'll be true to an aspirational self. That's what we talk about when we say fake it till you make it. But for Anna, motivational storyteller is not an aspirational self. She does not want to become like those idiots who were all about the form and had little substance. A second way we define authenticity is being sincere, saying what you mean and meaning what you say. Now, as it turns out, the word sincere has a really interesting origin. It comes from two Latin roots, sine, without, and cera, wax, without wax. And it comes from the days of ancient Rome, where it had become common practice for statue merchants to hide any flaws in their statues with wax. And the more scrupulous merchants, the ones who didn't want to be dishonest, would hang a sign outside their shops that said, sine cera. They were sincere. Now, for Anna, numbers are sincere, unvarnished. Anything else is playing games. But we all know that the first principle of effective communication is tailoring to your audience, your message to your audience. But when you're new to it, when you're not comfortable with that, you insist that the numbers should speak for themselves. A third definition is being true to your values. Now, for Anna, the values of substance over form, or no BS, had been so ingrained all the way back to engineering training, engineering school, where I'm sure they didn't have courses on the art of telling a good story. But she's no longer working as an engineer. She needs a bigger repertoire. So what's happening with Anna is a classic example of what I call the authenticity paradox. And it looks like this. You get to a what got you here won't get you there moment, and you see yourself as facing a trade-off between doing what it takes to be effective or being yourself. It's one or the other. You define being yourself in terms of the skills, competencies, and values that got you here. You want to move up or be successful or have more impact, but you're a little bit ambivalent about the transition. You're a bit afraid you're going to have to sacrifice your values, your integrity. You don't want to do it like all those bozos who came before you who were less sincere or less well prepared or more political. And so the whole situation evokes a version of yourself that is at your most conservative, at your most cautious, which is neither authentic nor accomplishing what it is that you want to accomplish, but you stick to it because you feel morally justified in being authentic. Can you recognize those situations? So how do you get out of that? What works? Well, let me tell you, you cannot think your way or reflect your way out of the authenticity paradox. You have to act your way into a new way of thinking about yourself. Let me give you another example. This one's based on my own experience. When I started my career as a business school professor many, many moons ago, I think it's pretty fair to say that I was dismal as a teacher. Really not very good at all. By all measures, I was at the bottom of the barrel in terms of the teaching ratings. My students were disappointed that they didn't get the kind of gray-haired one that could tell the good war stories and connect them to the right networks. And I was not having any fun in the classroom teaching. And this was dragging out. And loads of people tried to help me. And they gave me invariably that same advice that we all get when we're having a hard time. Can you guess what it is? Just be yourself. And of course, as far as I could see it, that was the problem. I was too much myself, too introverted, too academic, too theoretical, too inexperienced, too scared, But one day, one of my colleagues came by to help me out and gave me somewhat different advice, somewhat different feedback. And I could hear him very well still today. He said, when you walk into that room, you have to recognize that this is an arena and you have to own it. He said, you're walking in there as if this was all about the content of what you have to deliver, the knowledge, the research, the ideas. He said, let me tell you, it has nothing to do with that. This is all about you owning the space, about your presence. And the only way that you're going to make it crystal clear to each and every one of those 90 students sitting there that this is your space and not their space is to be a dog and go mark your territory in each of the four corners of that amphitheater. You go up there, Herminia, go all the way to that back row. That's where the troublemakers sit. They think they're safe. You're not going to see what they're up to, but you go right up there and you look at what are they doing? Did they take notes? Did they highlight the case? Are they prepared? Are they doing something else? You get to know them one by one. You put your arm around them. Whisper in their ears. Get in their face. Touch them. Develop a relationship. Even if they're sitting in the middle row, the middle person, you squirm in there and you have a conversation. And by the way, if you get a little hungry in all of this and they have some food, just take a bite, have it. It's your room, it's not theirs. Now, how much do you think I want to take this advice? I much, much preferred sticking to my highly ineffective method of staying up all night over preparing. But at some point, I got desperate enough to do it. You think it worked out? Not right away. Not right away. Some of them really didn't like me being in their face. But I got their attention. I started to get to know them a little bit better. I learned more about what they were interested in. I learned more about what they were looking for from the class. And ultimately, this little experiment of mine eventually ended up changing two important things: how I saw my job and how I saw myself. Because before, the way I saw my job was about me delivering what they needed to know. This shifted me to thinking about how do I create conditions that increase engagement, that increase learning. And that freed myself up to experiment, and I started to learn. In terms of how I saw myself, I was an introverted, serious academic. I wasn't one of those people into the infotainment and silly theatrics. But as I started to see the power of teaching in this new and different way, I started to see the value of it, and I came to see that I could be good at it, and that it could help me accomplish what I wanted to accomplish. I had acted my way into a new way of thinking about myself and thinking about my job. Now, years later, as I started to see more and more people take the experiment and learn approach with more success, I started digging for a more expansive definition of authenticity. And it turns out that the word authenticity comes from the Greek word autentheos, which originally meant that which you do with your own hands, and started to develop to mean being the author, acting of your own authority, and eventually being self-authoring, which is the definition that the humanistic psychologists, Abraham Maslow, Carl Rogers, the people who are interested in self-actualization, that's the definition they built on. And they saw authenticity not as a trait, not as something that you either have or you don't have, but the outcome of a process of becoming your own person, a lifelong process of learning about yourself. Now, before you start nodding, great, this is good, learning about yourself is good, remember what's involved. Learning means doing stuff that doesn't feel very comfortable because you don't know how to do it yet. It means being a Machiavellian mark the four corners when you're an introverted academic. It means telling a soppy emotional story when you're a by-the-numbers kind of person. And so that's why it helps to be playful with your sense of self. And by that I mean the opposite of taking a work-like approach. When you work, you're serious. You don't deviate from the straight and narrow. You're goal-oriented. When you play, you're playful. You're free to experiment. You try things out. If it doesn't work, you try something else. You are not committing to being that person. You iterate. Think of it as fast prototyping with yourself. So the next time you face a what got you here won't get you there moment, you have a choice about what definition of authenticity you're going to hold yourself to. Are you going to favor the insecure, conservative, historical self, or will you choose to learn and act your way into becoming truly authentic? Thank you.